Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about my favourite books from the last 6 months. So my best books of 2021 so far. I feel like this is always a much anticipated video on BookTube around this time of year. So I'm very excited to be talking about my top books that I've read so far this year. I think it's a really interesting mix of books, and I think what I'm most excited about with this list is that I know that this is not it for the year. I just know that there are going to be some fantastic books that I read in the next 6 months that are going to end up knocking off even some of these, and that's exciting. It's exciting to know that there are still some fantastic books yet to be read. And to be honest with you, there is no order to this list right now. I'm picking up the books off the pile as I get to them. So without much further ado, let's get straight into the books. So the first book that I want to talk about today is A Curious History of Sex by Kate Lister. This is a book that I have mentioned quite a few times. In fact, I think I've mentioned it on either a video that's coming out or one that has just gone out, and I talk about it so much because I absolutely love this book. If you want further qualification on how much I love this book, well, you may be asking, why is there like a little train ticket in there? Why is there a bookmark in there? It's because I've given this to my housemate to read because she was asking about the best book that I've read recently, and I was like, I don't know if you're interested in the topic, but here you go. And she has, and she's gotten to the conclusion and she loved it. So, you know, further endorsement. As the title suggests, this tracks society's relationship to sex and sexuality over the past 2-3 millennia, and covering all sorts of different aspects of sexuality, including terminology, sex work, contraception, medical advances, our attitudes to sex and marriage, to abortion, sexual preference, sexual assault. All sorts of different things are tackled in this book. Even though it is definitely a whistle-stop tour to these different topics because it is covering so much, it still feels really informative and very well researched. And I absolutely love Kate Lister's way of telling this history. It's kind of casual and irreverent and colloquial, and I think that wouldn't work for everybody, but definitely I think if you are wanting a way of getting into this history, it is very approachable. She's just a very funny writer, and I'm definitely keen to read anything else that she puts out. Next up, we have one of my first favourite reads from the beginning of this year, which is British on Race, Identity and Belonging by Afua Hirsch. This is part memoir, part non-fiction history, all about the United Kingdom and particularly its relationship to imperialism, race and class. It's part memoir because it is Afua Hirsch talking about her own experience growing up mixed race in Britain and how that left her often without a sense of identity, with a white Jewish father and never feeling truly white around her school peers, but then with a black mother and never feeling like she fully identified with her black family. It's a book that is very much about how we tell the history of race in the UK, which is often not at all, particularly on how school curriculums and governments really shy away from tackling grislier topics of our history, but how essential it is that we do tackle this. I know I read out this passage back when I originally reviewed it, but I want to bring it up again now. The debate over what version of history should be preserved and taught only goes to show how important and powerful narratives of history are in shaping identity. I've yet to find a British person who has no pride or interest in British history, in Shakespeare, in engineering feats of the Victorians, in the Beatles or David Bowie. So I find it remarkable when people assume that the worst excesses of racism are in the past now and that it's time to move on. No one ever says get over the Second World War, because even as increasingly there are fewer people who remember it, it has shaped our national identity as well as our geopolitical reality. No one says Shakespeare is in the past because his work is part of Britain's narrative. It has become part of what Britain is. Even if you wanted to put Shakespeare behind you, it would be virtually impossible since his legacy is embedded into every corner of British literature, language, drama and culture. And if it's impractical to put Shakespeare behind you, then it's even more difficult to get over the ideas enshrined by monarchs, governments, businesses, banks and even some of our favourite brands, that black people are inferior, that they have to prove their worth or their beauty, their intellect or their honesty, that only good immigrants are acceptable and that white British people get to be the judge. It's harder to get over those ideas because not only are they pervasive, but we still won't face up to them. So yeah, I just thought this was fantastic and definitely one that you should pick up. Next, we have another little yellow spined book. We have The Uncommon Reader by Alan Bennet, one that I've definitely been talking a lot about recently, which is a short little novella all about this idea of a fictional Queen of England, you know, based around our current Queen, but heavily satirised, and the story of her stumbling into a library one day, picking up a couple of books from said library and then suddenly becoming completely engrossed in literature, and the negative ramifications of her only ever wanting to read and not wanting to do her job as Queen. It's a short little book, but it is absolutely hilarious. The satire in this is just fantastic, particularly like commentary on royal manners, on how people behave around the Queen, on Britain just generally, and its attitude to literature. I just thought it was brilliant. Next up we have Dear Reader, The Comfort and Joy of Books by Cathy Rentzenbrink. This was a book that was very kindly gifted to me by Eva, and who I don't think at the point of filming this, but hopefully by the time that I put this video out, she will have also received from me for her birthday, so hey! Hopefully we can bond over this book. This is just an ode to reading. It is Cathy Rentzenbrink's memoir, all about her life, how she grew up, how she started working as a bookseller, and just generally her lifelong love of reading, and especially how books were often there for her when she most needed them. When she was most in need of comfort, she was always able to turn to books. I feel like this is just essential reading if you are a lover of books about books. If you are somebody who is in a bit of a reading slump at the moment and you want to have your love of reading reinvigorated, this is definitely the book to go for. It just reminds you of the magic of reading, of the way that reading can unlock new worlds, new points of view, how it can engender new communities around you, and connections with people that you otherwise wouldn't have interacted with before. And aside from that, it's just very, very readable. I flew through this in the course of one Sunday reading sprint over on either Anna or Shannon's channel, and it was just a delightful morning reading this. And look how beautiful it is. Next up we have Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud. This was another book that I read right at the beginning of the year and has just stayed with me ever since. This is a story set in Trinidad and Tobago, and it chronicles the life of a found family made up of mother Betty Ramdin and her son Solo, but also their lodger Mr. Cheaton, who ends up renting a room a couple of years after Betty's husband dies. Her husband, who had been very, very abusive to her and made her quite unsure and untrusting of men. Solo, who feels very lost because he doesn't have a true father figure in his life. Mr. Cheaton, who feels very lost in the world because, as we come to find out, he is a gay man living in a country that despises him, that has laws against him, where who he is not accepted, and so he can never truly be himself. And we see how the relationship between this found family really blossoms, but then we also see how this found family is affected by one poignant night when lots of answers are revealed. And I just thought this was brilliant. This was a book that I wasn't really expecting much of, and was just so wrapped up in these different characters and their lives. I cared about all of them. I wanted them to do well. I cried. But also what really brings me back to this book is the beautiful descriptions of Trinidad and Tobago, but especially the food writing in here. If you are a foodie, you will want to eat absolutely everything that is listed here. And I mean, I'm kind of fussy, but I absolutely would eat everything listed here. There are moments in this that are very, very raw and emotional, and some that are quite hard hitting, and I did mention it in my original wrap up, but if you are sensitive to reading about self-harm, then I would stay away from this, because I wasn't expecting that going into this, and it did kind of take me aback. But aside from that, it is just a stunning, stunning book. Can absolutely see why it won the Costa Book Award. Yeah, I just think it's great. Next up, we have a slightly different book. We've got Quiet Girl in a Noisy World, an Introvert Story by Debbie Tung. This was a book that I was kindly gifted by Melina over at Melina Reads for my birthday. And you might remember that last year, Leanne Rose actually gifted me another of Debbie Tung's books, which was Book Love. I'd absolutely loved that, so of course I wanted to read this, because it is all about being an introvert, which I definitely am. And it's just these stunning black and white and grey illustrations of Debbie Tung and her experiences growing up living life as an introverted person in a world that is definitely built for extroverts. All different scenarios that are just very, very relatable to me. But also I think the highlight of this is really her depicting her relationship to her more extroverted boyfriend and later husband, and how he really helps her to get out of her shell, but also is a very comforting presence, and he never pushes her further than she wants. Him trying to bring her out of her shell is always in support of her. It's never bullying or making her feel less than. It's a slightly different kind of book to have on a list, but yeah, I just thought this was so lovely and so comforting and very, very relatable. Next up, we have yet another gift from a lovely, lovely person that I know through BookTube. We have The Taming of the Clueless, which was sent to me by Eva at Pretty Purple Polka Dot, so thank you very much, Eva. I feel like I've mentioned this absolutely ad nauseum at this point, but this is a Shakespeareanized version of the script to Clueless, taking the plot of the 1995 movie Clueless and just transplanting it into 1595 with absolutely hilarious results. If you like Shakespeare, you should read this. If you love Clueless, you should read this. I feel like Clueless weirdly fits very, very well into a 5-act Shakespearean structure. Once again, I've got to read my favourite part, which is the bit of Clueless where Cher is really lamenting men's fashion of the 90s and talking about how she just doesn't get how guys dress today, that they look like absolute slobs. Though I'd not be a traitor to my age, no turncoat to my generation bold, I do confess confusion and dismay. The way lads dress is nothing short of odd, as if they fell like apples from their beds, adorn themselves in poorly fitting pants, more like broadband rags, then pantaloons in trough, then cover greasy hair with filthy caps which they wear backwards and proclaim its style. In public they appear arrayed as such, and should we women swoon to see them so? Nay, I think not, and never shall be swayed. It also has some great illustrations, some of which are like direct parallels to the movie and some which are Shakespeareanized versions, and this just brought me a lot of joy, and I was just cackling hysterically on the bus reading this. They also have a version of this for Mean Girls, which I have read and enjoyed, as well as for Back to the Future and the Star Wars films. So, you know, there's something for everyone, I think. The penultimate book on this list is The On-Honeymooners by Christina. This was another one that was a bit of a shock to me that I enjoyed it so much. I feel like I've just not read a good rom-com in quite a while, so this just really hit the spot for me and brought me a lot of joy. So in this lovely little rom-com, we are following Olive and Ethan. Olive, who is just constantly unlucky compared to her older sister, who has everything, it seems. And Olive's older sister is getting married. Olive, of course, is the maid of honor, but at her sister's wedding, something disastrous happens. All of the guests come down with food poisoning as the result of some very bad shellfish. That is everybody but Olive, who is allergic, and then the best man, Ethan, who is just very fussy and doesn't eat buffet food. In this case, quite rightly. And so we have this very unlikely situation in which Olive is asked by her sister to please go on her planned honeymoon with him, because unfortunately they have non-refundable tickets and her sister doesn't want it to go to waste. There's only one real issue here, which is that Olive and Ethan cannot stand each other. They hate each other. And yet, for the sake of making her sister happy, Olive and Ethan do agree to go on this holiday together. All the while they are trying to spin this lie that they are actually a newly wedded couple. And all the while getting to know each other and trying not to hate each other, Olive and Ethan have to spin this lie, this very elaborate lie, that they are actually a newly married couple completely obsessed with each other. And I'm not going to spoil too many plot points for this, but the way that they have to do this is hysterical. And you know, it is a rom-com, so of course romantic things start to happen, and Olive and Ethan start to find out that they are not as horrible and dastardly as they thought they were. And yeah, like I say, it's been a while since I've had a good rom-com to read, having a couple to root for, so this was definitely just a reminder that I need to pick up more books like this. They bring me joy, so why not? And then we are on to the final favourite book so far in 2021. I think if I had to pick one book that was my favourite, it would be this one. I think you could probably tell which one it is, but it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. No, I will never shut up about this book. This is one that has been getting so much buzz and attention on YouTube, and it kind of hits the sweet spot of like a very hyped book on YouTube, which also really appealed to me, and I thought, you know what, if this does deliver what people are saying it does, then I will love this. Did that make sense? I don't know, but anyway, it did that. We have to treasure these moments when a hyped book really does live up to its expectations. So this book starts off in 1714 in France. We meet the main character of Adeline LaRue, who grows up in a little village outside of Paris, and she is incredibly dissatisfied with her life, not least because she is imminently having to marry a man that she doesn't love. She is being forced by her family to finally settle down, and this is exactly the opposite of what Addie wants, because she's seen the effect of marriage and parenthood on the other women of her town. She doesn't want to live a life where she is completely trapped inside her village with no chance of escape, with no chance of being able to adventure outside her town. She wants freedom. She wants to be an artist. And so on the night of her wedding, she runs away. She runs into the forest with her father in pursuit behind her. She drops down in the field and starts to pray to all of the gods that she knows, praying for somebody to please stop this from happening, to please help her be free. And to Addie's surprise, somebody does respond, saying that they will help her. They will give her a means of being free, of not having societal obligations on her anymore, and even the chance to live forever, or at the very least until she no longer wants to live. And without really stopping to consider the fine print of that arrangement, Adeline says yes, because she thinks to herself, the chance to live forever, the chance to not be obligated to anybody, absolute win. Who wouldn't want that? But as is always the case, these deals are never what they seem. There is always a catch. The catch for Addie being that even though, yes, she has everything that she wanted, she can live forever, she is not tied down to anybody or anything, this demon has cursed her to be completely forgettable. Her family do not know who she is anymore. And not only that, but she is unable to make new connections with her family or anybody else for that matter, because even though she can have full conversations with these people, the second that they turn away from her, they forget her again. And we're really seeing the ramifications of this curse, because not only do her family not recognize her anymore, Adeline, or Addie as she comes to be known, cannot really live in society in a normal way. She cannot have property because any landlord or even an innkeeper would forget about her and kick her out onto the street thinking that she was a vagrant. She can't hold down a job. She can't even engage with the historic events that are going on around her because she has to live so in the present because nobody is truly aware of her. Even though this is a book that is meant to be historical fiction, it because of this curse becomes very ahistorical, because Addie doesn't have the luxury really of being able to engage in what is happening, because she finds that she cannot truly connect with people as much as she tries to. And we see her through 3 centuries of really working, trying to make her mark upon the world and finding very few ways of doing that. Because another aspect of this curse is that she cannot write anything down herself, she cannot make drawings, she can't even cut her own hair, it will just regrow back. But she finds a little bit of a loophole in that she can kind of influence other people, and she finds her way of making her mark upon the world by being a muse to artists, because these artists can depict her or her ideas even long after they've forgotten her. That's one aspect of the story. And then the second aspect of this plot is what happens 3 centuries later in 2014, when she's wandering through New York and she comes across a man who seems to remember her. For the first time in her life, she's coming across somebody who doesn't forget her instantly. And it's a bit of a mystery of how on earth is this the case? How does she have this person who seems to be a loophole to this curse that has bound her for 3 centuries? And yeah, it's just great and really emotional, and I love the characters in this. I mentioned in my mid-year book freakout tag that I had a crush on 2 characters in this. I don't know what to say, you know? I think that's just a sign of a very well-written character. And I just think it's a fascinating look at human connection, and another example of a book that deals with this topic of death and immortality and deals with the devil, which, as we know, I love very much. And I love getting to see the events of the past 3 centuries through Addie's lens, which is very, very detached. I just think that adds such an interesting dynamic to this story. And yes, this is probably my favourite thing that I've read so far this year, and I'm hoping that I will get a reread done before the end of the year. So yes, those are all of my favourite books so far in 2021. As I say, I'm really, really excited for this second half of the year and seeing what great, fantastic books I have in store. Let me know what you think about any of the books that I spoke about today, and also let me know about any of your favourite books, anything that you would recommend to me. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.